So today we want to talk about kind of like the other side of van life, the stuff that we don't talk about very often. And although we try our very best to like incorporate, the real stuff with the romanticized stuff and all of that onto our channel and into our vlogs, sometimes things can just get misconstrued. And I think that this topic is so interesting for me because I hate when people are like, oh, like nobody's talking about this. Nobody's talking about the other side of van life or the bad sides or whatever. And I actually disagree with that. I think that a lot of people are talking about it, and I think a lot of people are like making an effort to show the good and the bad side of van life through vlogs or sit-down videos or whatever it may be. We're just going to be kind of speaking on our experience living in a van, kind of the things that we didn't really expect were going to be like as bad as they are, or things that were maybe like shocking to us, or things that we feel like maybe we haven't like touched on enough on our channel. And then of course this comes with another caveat that we are in like a very privileged position where we chose van life. This was a choice for us because it sounded like something fun for us to do. And not everybody who's living in a van is in that situation. I say this a lot on our YouTube channel as well as our TikTok page. It's never appropriate to ask someone why they're living in a van. We try to be as open as possible on this channel. And if you have any questions about van life, please come to people who are positioning themselves as somebody who's open to talk about that. People are living van life for all sorts of different kinds of reasons. So in this video, I don't want it at all to sound like we're like complaining about van life, because our life is really great and we chose it purposely. So with all of that being said, let's get started and let's talk about the downsides or the other side of van life.
And the first thing that I want to talk about is chores and how they're much different. Like having a chore day is much different in a van than it would be in your standard home. This is typically because things take quite a while to do. We always say that it's really easy to make a van messy, but it's also fairly easy to clean it. But before you start driving, like you have to make sure that everything is secured, everything is cleaned off, dishes, like us having a small sink, which we don't like. We have to make sure that a lot of our dishes are already done because it doesn't fit very many dishes. Chore days can be kind of a pain.
You are doing chores that you wouldn't typically do in a regular home, like filling up your water, emptying your gray tank and your black tank and all of that. Like these are things that people in like traditional homes don't have to do. And sometimes when we're doing like a chore day, it takes up the entire day, and it requires a lot of driving around and doing research and figuring that all out. So I think that that is something that is like overlooked on social media, especially for us. Like we don't want to be filming on those chore days, not because we don't want to show people, but because it's just another chore, like it's another thing to do.
Yeah.
I think that something that people don't understand about like YouTube videos is like, they're like, oh, you didn't show this or you didn't show that. It's like, because everything that you do, if you're cooking a meal, for example, and you're filming like the chopping and the preparing and all of that, and then you're filming cooking the meal, it basically doubles the amount of time. And the same goes for the chores as well. So now it's like, we're emptying all this stuff, we're doing this, we're trying to find locations to be able to do all that stuff. And like, I think that maybe people who are posting online aren't trying to like hide it from people per se, but it's a lot those days.
The next thing that we wanted to talk about is parking, especially finding a place to stay overnight. If you're not, off grid, up in the mountains somewhere, say you are in a city, finding a place that's appropriate to park where, no one's gonna call you in. There are no signs that say that you're not allowed to be there. All kinds of troubles that you can run into parking. And say you have to stay somewhere in a city for multiple nights. Now you're also looking at, finding a different place each night, because typically you don't want to stay in the same place, especially if there are homeowners around. You don't know how like a van life van is going to be perceived, so you don't want them to call you in and say, hey, there's people outside my house, I don't know how long they're going to be here. So just to avoid that, you typically want to find different places to park, which can turn into a bit of a pain. There are apps that we find very helpful. iOverlander is one of them, for example. Most people who do van life will use this app, especially if they're staying in a city.
Everyone.
Yeah.
iOverlander isn't perfect either, because sometimes, you'll find a spot, but the reviews from like 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Or it's like, yeah, I spoke to the Home Depot manager, but it's like posted from 2020. You know, like,
Yeah.
is that the same manager? And now you're dealing with all of that. So, like, and you're hoping that the person on Ireland or that was there before you has as good of judgment as you think that you do.
Yeah.
And so it's not perfect. It's community run, which is fantastic, but ultimately you don't know the people who are writing the reviews for the most part. So it's like, it's kind of still a toss up in the air. Also, just, most people, if you have a heart, you don't want to bother people or like freak people out. So it's like, okay, I'm pulling into this residential neighborhood tonight, which everyone does. If people say they don't, then they're lying. You have to sometimes.
Yeah.
And then it's like, I don't want to be like freaking out this family where it's this weird ominous white van is pulling up and there's people in the back of it, right? So it's like that too. And then wanting to leave early in the morning. There's not a lot of sleeping in with van life.
You don't often get to sleep in, especially if you're staying somewhere like in a residential area, like Rachel was saying.
Yeah.
You know? It does happen occasionally where you'll get to sleep in a bit, but typically, you know, van lifers quickly turn into morning people.
It's so nice when you're off grid, like if you're on BLM land or Crown land in Canada, and it's like you can just sleep.
Yeah.
Because it's such a big part of van life is like you're constantly moving around. And obviously if you have a stationary home, you're not thinking about that. It's just another thing to think about in your day. And it especially gets complicated when you're working a job. So we work on YouTube and then we also teach online, but we're not working like a 9-to-5 job. We were at one point and living in a van in a city. At least we were familiar with that city. But some people are working, you know, remotely. They're working 9-to-5 and then they're still traveling the country or whatever. So they're finding parking spots. They're filling up their water and all of that. Like van life itself is like a part-time job.
Yeah.
And just existing in a van. The next thing is like a very real thing and kind of goes like with parking in residential neighborhoods and then beyond that. Is just like the judgment and the stigma that still very much exists with van life. I always say there's like two types of people. There's the people who think van life is like awesome. People are like, yeah, like you're getting after it, you're doing something. And then there's the other people who are like, who would ever want to do this? That's awful. Like get a job kind of thing, right? Which is funny because we have jobs, and a lot of van lifers do. You have to be conscious of it when you're traveling around that not everybody around you is like, whoa, that's super dope. Like, there's a lot of people around that don't like that you're in your van in their neighborhood or even their city. There's a lot of people who are trying to, like, force van lifers out. There's a lot of, like, bylaws that are trying to prevent people from living out of their vehicles. And especially if you're traveling around, you have to learn each city's like opinion on van life as you're going through. So you're going and you're seeing all these beautiful things and you're doing all this stuff, and that is true and great. We're also learning like, what are the real regulations here? Like, are you allowed to sleep in your vehicle overnight here? What is the opinion of van lifers here in this neighborhood, that neighborhood, and the other neighborhood? And kind of like navigating that. And you have to have some kind of, I mean, you don't have to. You could just go and live your life and not care. But most people will make some kind of like conscious effort to understand and be able to like work around those stigmas while still enjoying your life. And it is like a balance.
You know, the old saying or whatever, it's like, oh, you know, if you don't go to school, don't go, you know, get a job or go to college, you're going to end up in a van down by the river. And now it's, hey, if you're lucky enough and your life goes well, you can end up in a van down by the river. So people are coming around about it, although, of course, there's still those people who
hate it.
Hate it. So,
and of course, we can't go without mentioning that, like, again, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, but there are people living in their vans by choice, and there are people who are forced to live in their vans because they're not economically secure, and they can't afford to live in a home. And I hate the separation of those two in the way that society views those two types of people. I hate when I'm talking to someone who thinks that van life is like sick and like really cool, and then they make fun of or frown upon someone living in an RV up the road, you know? Yeah. We're all just people ultimately, and because someone has a $200,000 Sprinter van doesn't make them any better than somebody who is working a 9-to-5 job and busting their ass and living out of the back of their car.
Yeah.
And I hate the separation that like one is very cool and one's not, and like
it's all, van life is like an all-encompassing term for all people who have vehicles as their homes. It's not just, you know, just because like we have a build that
it's like aesthetically
pleasing and most people consider beautiful, doesn't make us any different from somebody who is living in a car and it may not look as aesthetically pleasing to your eye.
I mean, there's classism in every single state, country, industry, everything.
Yeah.
And people do it like with apartments and stuff too, but it feels a lot more prevalent with van life, and I don't know if it's just because we're living it, but it seems blaringly obvious that there is a lot of classism in van life. And for all of that, I don't have the answer. I'm not suggesting I have the answer. It's just something that does come up when you're living in a van or you're thinking about entering the van life space.
This next one is a big one. It definitely hits close to home, and I mean, literally, like, your van is your home. So if your van breaks down and say you need to go to a mechanic, you don't have the tools to fix it yourself or the know-how, you're out of not only your vehicle but your home. This is something that we've come across already. We were lucky enough that, you know, our vehicle was only in the mechanic for like, well, it was 2 days, but like separate days. So it was one full day and then another full day another time. So we never had to like rent an Airbnb or do anything like that. But we know people that have, and it happens often. Like, I mean, it's, especially if you're buying like a vehicle that, you know, has already been used before, you're bound to run into some sort of issues at some point. And it sucks when, you know, you're driving along, your check engine light starts flashing at you and you have to get a tow to a mechanic and you don't know how long you're going to be.
It's a different kind of anxiety.
Yeah.
Than typically if you know, you're driving your car, your check engine light comes on, you're like, oh shit. And like anyone who's in the low income situation would know that just screams dollar signs. Like you see the check engine light and you just think money, like instantly. But on top of money for fixing the van, it's also the money that goes into paying for a hotel and all of that. That could be really detrimental to somebody who has put all their money into their van as a home. For those living on the road, our vans are everything to us.
Yeah.
We have such close emotional ties with our vans. A lot of us, it's our greatest asset. And some of us, like for us, it's our job. One of our jobs is to be living in a van and talking about it. Our van is everything to us. Yeah. So it's not as simple as just like a little check engine light or like a quick, oh, oops, like they knocked off my mirror kind of thing. It's serious for us.
Yeah. Next up for us is emptying your toilet or going and using public restrooms. You have to find somewhere appropriate to dump your toilet. So typically like a blackwater dumping station, things like that. Having to go to the bathroom in your van and then find somewhere to empty it, or even just using public bathrooms like I was saying. Like we were in San Diego recently and the public bathrooms just don't have doors.
Like the walk of shame into the Walmart that you've been staying at for the past 2 days.
Yeah.
Like these are things that it's just so... And okay, also this bothers me because people are like, people aren't talking about this. It's like, yeah, because it's nasty to talk about. It's not because we're trying to like hide it from you. I just think that it'd be
Do you
kind
really
of
want to
like,
hear about it?
Yeah, like I feel like it'd be a bummer like halfway through our vlog. Like we're like, oh, drone shot of this place. And then, oh, by the way, like I have to go to the bathroom. I don't really want to announce to the internet whenever I have to go to the bathroom. But yeah, it's like...
Do you announce to your, like, you watching, do you announce to your friends, like, I'm gonna go take a shit now?
Yeah.
Like, maybe you do, but let us know in the comments down below if you do.
It's just like so, it's just such a funny thing. But the truth is that every single van lifer that you've watched online, every single one, and I say this with confidence, and I don't know them all. I say it with confidence, every single one of them has peed in a bottle, pooped in a bag.
Yes.
Like, there's been a time, unless they have a self-composting toilet, in which case disposing of your solids is a lot more pleasant, but they're still dumping their pee. They just spent $1,200 and they're still dumping their pee.
Yes.
So this is just a thing that is real about van life.
Yeah.
And if that creeps you out or grosses you out, that's fine. You don't need to like it, but maybe van living isn't for you.
So this one is kind of funny to us because before we had started van life, we were all just always under the impression that like, hey, we're not going to be spending all this time in the van, which is also why we got like an ambulance that I can't fully stand up in. Was because we're like, hey, we're going to be in here to cook some food, eat it, go to bed, and then we're going to be out hiking and doing stuff. But we're not doing that all that often, you know, like we said at the beginning of the video with parking and things like that. Like it takes all day, like to clean and then, you know, find a place to park. Like it can take all day. So finding time to get exercise and to get your steps in is not actually as easy as you think. For us, it's a little trickier because we have the YouTube channel. We also teach online. If you're not someone who's running a YouTube channel or teaching online, you may find it a little easier. You may have more free time to do those things. But for us, it's definitely not something that we have time to do. And, you know, even if we weren't doing all this stuff, there's still, like I mentioned, you know, there's a lot of things that you need to do throughout the day. And, you know, before you know it, it's dark and you're like, shit, haven't done anything.
And say it's a rainy day or something, like, and you stay inside. It's so nice. Like, it's so cozy in here. We love being inside the van. Mm-hmm. Again, it's our home. We built it with our own hands. We're obsessed with it. But if it's like, okay, like it's a hunker down and work day and we're just going to be in the van with doors closed. People do that at home, of course. That's fine. But you just naturally get way less steps in, because for me to walk from my bedroom, which is right there that Nick can touch, to my kitchen, which is right here that I can touch, it's like 3 steps. Maybe.
Not even.
Maybe 1. So it's like, okay, so you're not really like moving around as much naturally. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes like on those days, there has been days where I've looked down at my phone and I'm like, oh, I got like 1,000 steps today.
That's pushing it. I've had days where it's like 30, 40 steps.
Well, that's because like you walked into the, like, I'm counting like walking into the Walmart and using the bathroom.
True, yeah.
Like,
yeah.
It's just, sometimes you go on a hike and you get 30,000 steps in a day, and the next day it's like 50. And it's like, I'm not sure this is very consistent for my body. So yeah, but I do think that's funny too. It's kind of like ironic because you think like van life outdoors, but sometimes you're not getting the exercise.
Yeah.
With all that being said, I think that those are like our main van life downsides. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I don't want to sound at all like we're complaining about our lives. We're in a position that is really, really great, and we absolutely love our lives, and we would still recommend van life to people who have the opportunity to do it and are in a similar situation to what we were in. I have no regrets about living in a van, although these are things that we have learned after being on the road for over 1.5 years now.
Yeah, like Rachel said, thank you so much for watching this video. We really appreciate it. We also have merch if you're interested in supporting us. You'll see that down below this YouTube video. Rachel designed it herself. Definitely press like on the video if you liked it, because that helps us out. Please subscribe if you haven't, because that also helps us out. And if you really like us, we also have a Patreon account that you can go and check out. We post kind of funny, more raw stuff there. Check that out. You'll find that in the description of this video. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. We really appreciate it. And we'll see you in the next video. Bye.
Bye.